Ted fala senji tavi Lod na chwefin gud Moda vega teliu O keini choron stu modui Ishi tu
Okay, so let me take a good look because its screen is pretty deep in here. So what are we seeing? Are we seeing a guy in a car?
This is the beginning of the game. So the game is an adventure game set in a gothic horror setting in the 1926 Scotland.
Oh, we're dressed in black.
We're pretty much meant for this game.
Exactly. It's a kind of Edgar Allan Poe, H.P. Lovecraft, this kind of style of a game. So psychological horror, a lot about the darkness in the hearts of men, all these kind of stuff.
Very eerie.
Very eerie. Not so much in the kind of splatter and intestines everywhere and blood, but rather really about
psychological
and,
it's
and
not
the
a scary,
suspicious of your own mind
game.
and if you're going
Ooh,
insane.
I like
and
it
this kind of
already.
stuff.
Ooh.
Oh, who's she? What's she doing?
This is grandmother Lady Gordon, who is not very happy that the protagonist of the game, the hero, David Gordon, who you can see here, has arrived at the castle. He's the new heir of the castle because his father killed himself, and he's here to find out about the mysterious circumstances of his father's death. While Lady Gordon, as you can see from her facial expression, is not very happy to have an outsider suddenly coming in and claiming to be the new owner of this very old establishment. Even though it's run down, it doesn't have not much more money to inherit, but still for her, even though he's family, he's an outsider who should better
That's
leave.
his mother.
That is his grandmother.
His grandmother, who has a fabulous choker, I might add. No, I really like
she's with the times.
Oh man, it's really cool. So what inspired you guys to go within this genre?
The original series is from 2003 to 2009. Was produced back then. It was a trilogy of point-and-click adventures. So your classic point-and-click adventure gameplay, and is still a very popular game because of its very high level of detail and its special atmosphere, because of this kind of eerie gothic atmosphere, which does not rely so much on like jump scares and stuff like this, but rather really on interesting puzzles and the horrible things people will do under strange circumstances. And so for us it was just basically rebooting a series that was already very much in our hearts with the developer King Art, who have already worked on the second part of the original series. We're rebooting it completely, so it's for a new gamer. You don't have to play the originals.
So it's not a sequel.
It's not a sequel, not a prequel, or anything like this. The reason for this, we know the word reboot sends shivers down the spines of many people.
As if the original wasn't good enough.
But that's not, like, we're actually looking very closely at the originals because they have such a unique atmosphere. But we did want to go towards a more cinematic approach with more close-ups, more cutscenes, more dramatic dialogue, and also more close-up interactions, as you can see now in the video, interactions with objects that you find. And for this, we also wanted to have a fresh start because the originals had one story arc over the whole trilogy, and the story arc was actually finished in these the 3 games, and it had a very deep mythology that, you know, in a horror game, it's a lot about finding out are there kind of supernatural things going on? Is there just madness? Is there just a murder or something like this? So if you take that away from the beginning, you obviously lose a lot.
Yeah.
And for the gamers who played the originals, they already know all of this. So we wanted to give them a new kind of mythology. So for them, it's again like a new experience, finding out what goes on in this seemingly haunted house, and just finding out whether, if there is actually something supernatural going on, or just a very human tragedy.
If you already have a trilogy
Yeah.
from 14 years ago that is fairly timeless, as you say, like
Yeah.
it has a very specific style, it is a very timeless game, why would you still choose to reboot that game and make it into a more like digital 3D kind of thing?
Especially because you can just show the atmosphere in a different way. The atmosphere was one of the reasons it is so popular still is the level of detail. It was back then, it was pre-rendered levels, like fixed cameras, so you could put in a lot of details. This we are trying to bring back because we know this is very important to the gamers. And at the same time, there were things you couldn't do with a point-and-click adventure. Point-and-click adventures have more complex puzzles, which we're trying to keep for certain parts of the story when the story is
That's
a bit
one of its
exactly
main attractions,
when the story is a bit slower, when he explores the castle and its surroundings and talks to the family, then you've got these more complex puzzles. So we didn't want to dumb it down too much. So you do have to use your brain quite a lot when you have got several puzzles going on at the same time, and you can basically approach them whenever you want to, like the way you want, in the sequence you want to. But at the same time, when the story is a bit moving forward quickly, you want to be a bit more in there with the gameplay, with quick time events, with like button interactions. And also we've introduced a new kind of gameplay to the game, with specifically tailored at a certain aspect of the game, which you can see now in the B-roll, is that one big topic in basically Gothic horror, and also in all the Black Mirrors, is always going insane. So struggling with your own sanity. So here you can see how the player basically, or the character in this case, walks around the room, and the room becomes more and more surreal the more he explores it. For him, this is just like he's doubting his own mind, he's thinking he's going mad. He has been tortured by nightmares all his life, and now suddenly at this castle, these nightmares become more and more drastic. So this kind of gameplay, we really wanted to tailor the gameplay to the story, tailor the story to the gameplay, and that's all much easier or better doable if you have the freedom to really start from scratch with the mythology, with the story, with the characters. And in the end, it also benefits the story because the first part is always a very special part. Like I think that goes for most of horror games and horror films and everything. So as you can see now, the room has become very surreal, has become like an underwater lake, and he can now basically interact with this ghostly apparition, this kind of memory vision. He doesn't know what it is. He might be just going insane. He might have a waking nightmare or a suppressed memory. This is what he's trying to find out. And these kind of scenes are in a loop, caught in a loop, and the player can walk closer and further away from it to stop it at the right time and examine it, and then find out more about this situation that he sees. And like this, learn about things from his past, the past of his family, of his father, that he never knew because his, relationship to his father was rather strained, because his father was obsessed with this idea that there's a curse on the family.
Oh, deep.
And
so is there I'm just curious, is there consequential like sequences? Like let's say, you go in and you don't discover something, or in fact you do discover something, would it trigger, sequences?
If you mean like different story strands or something like this, not as such.
So it's a little bit more linear, so you'll go through...
In general, it is rather linear. Okay. In between, as I said, when you have multiple puzzles at the same time, it branches out a little. Yeah, exactly. You'll have multiple puzzles at the same time, and you just solve them the way you want. And certain, like if you talk to a character in the wrong way, one of the solutions, the possible solutions, maybe will then disappear. So you'll have to find another way to solve the puzzles. but in the end, the story, you will not affect who survives or who dies, or
Okay.
whether the castle will burn down or not, or something like this. There's one ending, there's one story, because we really did want to really tell one strong story that we can potentially, if the players enjoy the new Black Mirror, it is obviously much easier to continue a story that has one ending instead of several endings. So what you can see here, for example, is a little bit of gameplay where the player needs to help him calm down after very stressful, intense situations. So these are these kind of little bits of gameplay that we wanted to introduce, and now he's meeting our lovely second hero, basically heroine, the lovely Dr. Leo Farber, who's basically the voice of reason, who's trying to help him to find out whether this is all in his head or whether there's really something sinister going on in this castle.
All right. Well, thank you so much for explaining a bit about Black